right, and here we go, right at the top of the hour. I am thrilled for us to kick off this session of Platform Academy. My name is Sharon Barnes, your Platform Outbound Product Manager and today's host. And we have an incredible session lined up that I can't wait for us to dive in. But before we get started, let me share just a few quick logistics. These presentations are crafted with you in mind. And our goal is to inspire you with those fresh ideas and practical use cases that help elevate your understanding of our platform tools. So feel free to fire away with your questions throughout the presentation. Just remember, post them into the QA section so that our amazing panelists can address them. Plus, don't worry if you miss something. The session is being recorded and will be made available on community through the Platform Academy forum. And we want to ensure that your voices are heard. So after the event, there's going to be a quick survey that helps us improve our content for everyone. Also, always have to mention, of course, to practice safe harbor. We might be exciting or sharing some exciting new features today. In fact, I know that we are. So let's keep everything compliant with those safe harbor best practices. So now let's get to the good stuff. I am thrilled to introduce our fantastic speakers, John, Justina, and Soumya, who are going to take us on a journey through what is new in Zurich for Data Management Console. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to our team.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I really appreciate the warm introduction. As Sharon mentioned, my name is Justina Buzza. I am an outbound product manager for cloud infrastructure and data management. I'm excited to help guide today's conversation. But before we get into some of the details, I wanted to get a sense of the room. What ServiceNow tools do you guys currently use to manage your data? Please select all that apply. A poll should be launching here any minute, and you'll have some options to choose from. Let me know, maybe, there we go. I see the poll jumped up. So archive rules, delete jobs, archive destroy rules, data management console, email retention plugin, clone, table cleaner, select all that apply. Go ahead, take your time. Excited to see what you guys use today in our tools. Okay, so it looks like we have quite a few people using clone, about 75%. We have a lot of folks after that using archive rules, and then email retention and archive destroy rules, table cleaner, data management console looks like come in a little bit low. So excited to talk through with you guys. So we have a really exciting lineup of topics that are all about making data management easier and more impactful for you. We'll start by exploring why data management is such a hot topic right now, what's at stake, and why it matters for you and your teams and your business. Then we'll dig into some practical strategies and solutions, including what's new in Zurich and how you can get the most out of our data management console. We'll also share some tips and best practices. And of course, we want to hear your questions and experiences along the way. So again, please jump in, use the Q&A panel whenever something sparks your curiosity. Let's get into the heart of today's session, data management. Before we talk about the latest features or best practices, I want to take a step back and look at what we actually mean by data management in the context of ServiceNow. At its core, data management is about how we handle the information that powers our business, how we store it, how we organize it, and make sure that's available for when we need it. It's the foundation that supports everything from day-to-day operations to long-term strategy. But why is it such a big deal? What makes data management so important for organizations today, especially as our data keeps growing and evolving? John, I'd love to hear from your perspective on why data management really matters for our customers and what's at stake if we don't get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Justina. So, yeah, I'm John DeSaint-Fal, another one of the product managers here. And, when I think about why data management matters, we're basically trying to provide you with solutions and strategies to help you ensure that you don't become completely overwhelmed by your data. And I often think about the story that I heard once in the 1930s. Basically, there were farmers in the American South that wanted to prevent soil erosion. So they took this plant that was originally native to Asia and they planted it, and it ended up growing about a foot per day and eventually swallowed entire forests, houses, and power lines. So we're basically here to make sure that that does not happen to your ServiceNow instance, right? We can't say that your data is not going to grow, but we can keep it in a controlled growth state, or at least understand how it's growing so that we can plan for the future. Because there are real consequences to uncontrolled growth, right? If you're not managing your data growth, your applications and queries will need to scan more data, they'll require more CPU time, and overall your performance will suffer. And, in addition to just performance, right, resource utilization is kind of a key point. My grandfather used to always tell me that nothing is free. And, the same is true for the resources that we use within ServiceNow. So every ServiceNow instance has a storage entitlement. So one very big reason why you might want to keep your data within a certain volume is to manage your bottom line and avoid any kind of unnecessary or unexpected charges. So that's another component, right? Compliance. Most of us operate in some sort of regulated environment. These require data retention policies of one form or another that may be specific to, your company or your industry or your geography or kind of a unique combination of those. And failure to implement these types of policies or meet the needs of these restrictions can result in fines or legal incidents. We know that these types of regulations are not going away, right? They're going to gain momentum. And so what is already pretty critical is going to become even more so in the future. And lastly, data accumulation creates a risk, right? So more data exposure, the more likely it is that someone will get access to something that they should not. And so I think the consensus is pretty clear amongst security personnel that excess data creates its own sort of unique kind of risk. And so, because of this, adequate data management is one of the most important aspects of managing your environment. It touches every business function within ServiceNow. Whether you do it right or wrong has immense implications for your ability to scale, and really to provide kind of a seamless user experience for all of your users, whether they be internal business stakeholders or external customers. So all of that together, I think, really dictates just the criticality of this.
Awesome. And John, given everything that you just shared, what's the big picture goal for ServiceNow when it comes to data management? How are we aiming to make things easier and more impactful for our customers?
I think really when we think about data management, our vision for the portfolio is sort of twofold. So, number one, we want to provide you with the right information so you understand what's going on in your environment. I saw a question in the Q&A earlier, how do I understand what's driving this volume? And so, these systems change very quickly. We want administrators to know exactly where to go and what to look for to evaluate the health of your system. And once you have that information, we want you to feel empowered to make changes, right? We want to give you the tools to address problems that you see within your instance. And so, those two things together should leave you feeling confident in managing your data. You can uncover problems, you know where to look, and you know how to solve them when you encounter them. I think all of that is incredibly empowering to all of us, regardless of the roles that we inhabit. And so, for this case in data management, that is absolutely our goal moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that thought behind how we're approaching these challenges, John. Of course, turning a vision into a reality often means making some tough choices. So, balancing different priorities and figuring out which tools fit each situation. Salmia, you work closely with customers as they navigate these different decisions. Can you share how organizations are approaching these trade-offs and give us a high-level look at the kinds of tools available to help?
Sure. Thanks, Justina. Hey, everyone. So I am an inbound product manager with the persistence and data management teams at ServiceNow. Continuing with what John spoke about and Justina, I want to showcase data management tools that we have today at ServiceNow and how it helps our customers to manage the entire enterprise data lifecycle while balancing critical trade-offs. So starting from data creation, the process and usage and sharing, it is very important to visualize and analyze the data that you have on each of your instances or database, and also have efficient tools to manage your data like archiving and deleting. While talking about the whole process and the life cycle itself, it is very important to have critical trade-offs in mind, like performance versus volume or retention versus cost, while ensuring that you are compliant and your data is matching all your data retention policies. So going ahead, I want to talk about how the data is managed today in ServiceNow. So currently we have multiple tools where you have to go to manage your data, starting with archive and archive destroy rules. These are basically rules that can be configured on each table to archive your data or delete your archived data after a certain amount of time. And then comes compaction, which helps address storage and performance for reclaiming the space that have been created by archiving or purging your data. But this requires additional effort to contact our support and get your reclaim your space back. And then there's table cleaner, which is also used to delete records to meet your criteria based on certain conditions to aim for deleting specific data. But what is missing with all this is we have tools to manage, but we don't have tools to visualize or analyze your data so far. And that's where we have introduced a new tool into our arsenal, which is Data Management Console. This is live starting Yokohama, and this tool basically provides insights into your storage across all your instance data, enabling better management of data, starting with the basic step, which is to visualize and analyze your data first, and then take the right decisions with very well informed decisions on your data to go forward. So that's going to be my focus for the next few minutes, and I'll show a quick demo as well in a few minutes.
I love that. Samio, and with the introduction of the data management console, how does the day-to-day experience for admins change?
So far, just with our data management console, one way to look at the table sizes or data usage of each table on the database is to go to support database footprint and then look at the sizes of the 10 tables that they have, which are the physical tables based on each of their instances. And this gives a very high level yes on the top 10 tables that are occupying the data, but this is not enough to take decisions on what to do on these tables or how to manage their data on these top growing tables. And that's where data management console comes into picture, which is an on-instance visualization of your storage usage, gives a high-level usage of the data and also about key insights of what are the tables that are growing at most and some granular details for them to take decisions as we go forward. Like I said, Yokohama release is our first release for Data Management Console. You have a new console out there for data management. In Yokohama, for those who have selected on the poll that you've already seen this, probably on Yokohama release is you see primary storage used on your instance for your total instance size, and then the top 3 tables. A trend for the last month for all your top 3 tables, and also just the sizes of those tables. We have enhanced this much, much further, not just experience, but also giving much granular details in Zurich. And we have, the users can now see data usage in the instance, monthly and weekly trends of the data usage for their top 10 tables and also the total size of the instance. You can also see the granular table level details, which tables are contributing to what, because ServiceNow database has a lot of tables. I'm sure it is very difficult to manage which table is part of which hierarchy is related to which table and how to structure and manage all this data. So we have provided the table level granular details in terms of data usage. And then also a provision to view the data management tools configured on each of these tables, and also a quick glimpse of the rule activities on those tables.
That's an awesome summary of all the new features in Zurich. Do you have time to give us a quick demo of them?
Yes, of course. Let me bring it up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you see my instance?
Yep.
All right. So how you navigate to Data Management Console is through the All menu, search for Data Management Console. It's right here under system data management. Once you hit on the console, you see an overview of all your probably major column statements that you have. What are the top tables that are growing in the last few days? What are the largest tables that we have? So just giving a quick overview of this dashboard, we show primary storage used in the instance and also growth in the last 30 days, a high-level trend chart of how your data usage has been. And there is a trend chart, which shows monthly data usage trends and also weekly data usage trends for your instance overall and also across the tables over the last few months. There is a list view which shows the top tables that are growing over 10 GB in the last 30 days, and also the tables that are occupying the largest amount of space on the instance, so that you have that picture just from the overview on which are the tables that are occupying the most growth in your instance. There is a provision to manage your audit configuration that cuts across all these tables, which navigates users to audit management console, which is also another product that we have. And then you can create a cleanup rule, choosing one of these tables if you wish to, and then create a new archive rule on any of these tables. Also, if you have seen before, this leads you to the same sysarchive.list or archive table that you have where you can create a rule, but you have all the options right here in data management console for you to manage your data as well. You have an option to view all the tables and not just the top tables. And you can see an overview of the table size of each of these tables, what has been the growth in the last 30 days, and also the number of active rules. Another detail that you also get from the overview right here for the top tables that are growing or top largest tables is also the associated record size. Associated record size is basically the attachments, audits, and journals that are associated with each of these tables. Most of the times, attachments is a problem where it's growing that is tagged to one of these tables, but it's not the size of this table itself. So you can choose to create rules on top of these tables, which has associated records growing, which in turn is contributing to your data usage in the instance. Today, I want to take you through one example, which is a task table. So in task table, each of those links that you saw before is clickable. You can view the table details of all the tables that you have on the instance. This overview gives you granular details that I was talking about before, about what is the overall table size, what has been the growth in the last 30 days, what are the associated tables, that is attachments, audits, and journals that are associated with this table, and the growth of the associated records in the last 30 days. You can also see a data usage trend for the overall table size in the instance and associated records in the last few months or weeks, similar to the overview. And also another very important insight that this granular detail gives is what are the tables that are part of, for example, task table as a child, or what are the records that are driving to the size of task table. For example, if you go into attachment table, you can see what are the records that are contributing to attachments table. So in this example, we have incidents and HR incidents contributing to the storage of tasks. And that's why you see them as part of the driver tables list. And also you see the split of associated tables as well. Having said that, the additional thing that we have on console in Zurich is what are the rules that are there on this particular table. This summary is on this table that is in context, which is tasks in our example, which shows what are the number of active rules and inactive rules overall on this table, how are they performing, and how you can measure that is by seeing the records and backlog count. By records and backlog, you can understand what are the number of records that are meeting certain criteria that you have for each of your rules, like archive rules, cleanup rules, or one-time delete. These are the 3 types of rules that we have embedded for visualization in Zurich release. And you can see the overall records and backlog that are meeting the criteria of these rules and see how they're trending, which gives you an insight into how your rules are performing in each of on each of your tables that you have rules configured for. This view also gives you all the list of all the rules, show you what is the status of each of these rules, what the type of each of these rules, and also a count of your records and backlog. We also have a history provided to see a quick execution history of each of these rules in the last 7 days on this table, if there was an event, or also for you to understand or debug if there was an issue in the past few days how your data has been impacted on your instance. This list is filterable. You can filter this list of execution history in the last 7 days based on different type of rule. Another thing that I want to show you also with Zurich is that we have embedded rule details view within data management console. So for example, if I take you through a particular rule that is configured on the task table that we have navigated from overall tables, you can see what are the records in backlog. So far, this particular example has 0 records that are meeting the criteria, but what are the number of records that are yet to be processed? What has been the trend so far of the backlog records, and also an execution history of your rule in the last 1 year. That's the overall summary that data management console gives, starting from a high level summary to what are the rules that you have to manage, and also how is your rule performing on the console. Overall, in line with our vision statement that we said before, we want to make sure that you have all the tools to make better decisions on your data and to have better management on your data at individual table level. So that's where data management console comes into picture.
Thanks, Samia, for showing how the data management console in Zurich gives admins a much clearer picture of what's driving that data growth and where to focus their efforts on cleanup and their management efforts. Now that we've seen how to uncover some of those insights, the next step is knowing what to do with them. So John, would you mind walking us through some of the tools and features that can help customers take action? I know Samia started touching on a couple of them. And just a quick reminder, as we dive into each solution, please feel free to add those questions that you have into the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you guys.
So yeah, thanks, Justina, and thanks, Samia, for that awesome demo. It's very exciting to see all the new things coming into data management. We wish we had that years ago. It would have made our lives a lot easier. So a couple other tools that I'll walk through. I think, based on the survey, it sounds like a lot of folks are using some, but there's no sort of 100% on anything. So I think it makes sense to go through a couple of the key items. So I did see that a lot of folks use archive rules. That's great. Less so on the destroy rules, so I'll kind of talk about both of those and how they fit together. Two of the most important solutions that we have in the data management lifecycle are these archive and destroy rules. And we mention them together because you generally configure them at the same time. And the main reason we create these rules is essentially to prune unused data from our live tables, and essentially ensure that applications that access those live tables continue to run on time. Something else to note, you may or may not be aware of, we introduced multiple archive rules in Xanadu. So we have a number of customers that have multiple use cases, multiple requirements that need granular control or different rules for archiving. And so we allow that multiple criteria starting in Xanadu. As Samia alluded to, archive rules are set at the table level. So a lot of these rules are managed on a table by table basis. And I may be dipping my toes a little bit into the best practices topic that we'll cover a little bit later, but it is really critically important that you think about the data lifecycle as you're creating these rules. One good example of that is reference fields. As you create archive rules, you need to decide whether or not you will retain reference fields or not. And so what does that mean, John? So as an example, let's say I have an employee whose name changes, and I might have archived records related to that employee, years ago. And if I retain those references, as that name changes in the primary system, it will actually update those archive records. And some people like that because it allows them to maintain the relationships that make ServiceNow so valuable. But there are others that need this archive to be completely immutable. They want that, reference field to be immortalized in a string and never changed. So these are the types of considerations that you can think about as you're building these particular rules. Auto re-archiving is another aspect of this. Basically provides you control over how long those records remain in the live table if you restore them. So, typically we see folks wanting to restore them for a week, maybe a month. That will vary, but those rules essentially allow you to configure that automated process. Once you restore, will automatically put it back in the archive after a certain period. The last thing that I'll touch on here are the destroy rules, and the destroy rules, sometimes known as archive destroy rules because they're associated with this archive process. These archive destroy rules basically dictate how long records remain in the archive before you delete them. And so I noticed a lot of folks were using the archive, fewer were using the archive destroy. So while the performance on your primary or your live tables is going to be, continue to be good or potentially improve with the offload, um, you're not really reducing the size of your instance. You're still keeping that history. It's continuing to grow. And so that's another thing just to keep in mind with this life cycle is, as you're creating these archive rules, obviously that process is important to manage, that particular aspect of your environment. Why not complete the circle, configure those destroy rules? And again, if you can do this at the beginning of the data lifecycle, that's always a plus.
Thanks, John. And I just wanted to touch on one thing specifically. So when a customer is archiving this data, is that data actually being offloaded from the ServiceNow instance, or is it being stored within their instance?
Yeah, that's definitely a good point to double click on. So archive data or archive rules does not actually move data out of your primary instance. So if you had 5 TB in your instance and you archive a bunch of data, you'll still have that same 5 TB. I will say, as a little bit of a teaser, Sharon alluded to some forward-looking statements. The idea of an off-platform archive or an archive that does not impact your primary storage allocation is of immense interest to ServiceNow, I will say. And so all the folks on this call will likely be hearing a lot more about that in the near future. So today everything is stored within the same platform. If you archive something, it's still on that primary, but definitely stay tuned in that space.
Okay, that's great. I saw some hearts and some thumbs up and some claps. So we really appreciate the little teaser there. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in that new capability when it comes out.
Another kind of key tool that we look at is table cleaner. So for data that you don't want to archive, for data that is not subject to compliance or data retention requirements that you simply want to remove, the best solution is table cleaner. We do have delete jobs that allow for a one-time delete process, but we're here today to talk to you about effective data management policies, practices that will set you up for sustainable success. And I would say that the customers that I speak to maybe most frequently are organizations that are looking to delete heaps of data when they have the prospect of an overage on the horizon. Um, if you choose to perform kind of these mass deletes in these scenarios rather than implement table cleaner rules, you will find yourself in the same chair time and again. And so when we talk about building sustainable success, giving you the tools to avoid those oh shoot moments and just kind of give you smooth sailing, I think table cleaner rules really allow you to continually delete that data and avoid this type of kind of pressure cooker scenario. The other thing that I'll mention around Table Cleaner that is slightly different is we did introduce improvements for Table Cleaner in YP7 that makes it considerably more performant. We introduce multi-threading. We allow more workers to process more data. I know historically there might be folks on older releases that looked at the Table Cleaner, maybe didn't get the performance that they want. So I definitely encourage you that might fall into that bucket to look at the Table Cleaner if you're on Yokohama patch 7 or above, because you will see significant improvement in that performance. I think the other question that I'm asked most frequently is once I've, moved data from my primary, once I delete it, why am I not just getting the data back immediately? Why don't I see that return in my instance volume? It's one of our biggest topics of discussion today. And I think it's really important to understand what compaction is and kind of the purpose of it. And I think that will help you sort of understand why we've made the decisions that we've made. So the purpose of compaction is essentially to rebuild a table when there's enough data to return back to the operating system for reuse. And so there are specific parameters by which we do that. And because it requires a full rebuild of the table, it takes time, right? It occupies space on your instance because we have to copy data, we have to rebuild it. So all of that is a process. It's not something that we take, very lightly. And we do this mainly to avoid locking the table during peak hours. For those of you that are kind of very deep in the database, you know about things like vacuuming, where you can immediately reclaim space, but things like that require a lock on your data. And so the reason we do this and we have these requirements is so that you can conduct these sort of, non-trivial processes and do so in a very controlled way. When we look at some of these parameters specifically, we have, you'll see a maximum table size in there of 2 TB, 100 million rows. And basically, when you encounter these types of large data sets, we highly encourage you to work with support. You essentially must work with support in order to get them compacted. And the reason that is because you have more data, more volume. It's a more intensive process. There's more risk involved in it. And so we just want to make sure that it goes smoothly for you. So there are parameters, thresholds to reach. What if we don't reach them? I think in a lot of cases, you're going to find that you're, near or in the ballpark of these thresholds, but you're not necessarily on them. And that's why we make them configurable. So there are adjustments that you can make, and basically the defaults that we chose are designed for, minimum disruption for your system. So you can adjust those specific properties. But again, I would encourage you to reach out to support for larger instances. The last thing that I'll mention just around compaction is I talk to also a lot of folks that say, I've got a 30 GB table. I see 1 GB free. Why can't I compact that? And again, think about the process that I just described, right? There is this concept of, juice and squeeze and what's worth it and what will have an impact. And I've seen a lot of people bury themselves in their, next 200, 300 tables to try to shave off incremental, storage. And it just becomes a bit of a game of diminishing returns. So focus on kind of the key contributors. Look at these statistics as kind of a guideline for when you should be doing this. Reach out if you have questions and tinker with them if you're kind of just on the edges of them following through.
Thanks for sharing all that, John. I think I've gotten a lot of questions around, hey, I deleted a couple records. Why didn't this run? Or I did a massive cleanup and now I have to go work with support. So hearing all of that kind of background explanation really helps clarify it for me, and I'm sure a lot of the folks on the call. So thank you.
The last tool that I'll mention within the confines of this conversation is Clone. So there are, a couple of things that I think I mentioned a little bit in the best practices, but you'll hear me reiterate them a few times because they are very important and I encounter them all the time. So Clone, what is the purpose of this tool? Again, it gets back to the purpose and what is it defined to do, and that really helps us understand how we should work with it. It's really designed to ensure that your sub-production environments have the data that they need for specific testing and development use cases. And I will add to that it's very rare that sub-production needs every single production table within its instance. And so that's why we provide configurable clones that allow you to exclude records during this process. I will not tell you how many people just clone their production database and then they spend all this time going in and deleting data that they could have simply excluded from the clone process. So that's a major thing to keep in mind. Focus on the data that you need, use those exclusions, and you'll find yourself with hopefully a little bit more time on your hands that previously you might have been spent cleaning up some of that sub-production data. So just something to keep in mind in Clone as you move forward.
Awesome. So we've covered a little bit of the what and the how. Now I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit how to do it well. So John, what are your top tips and best practices for efficient data management? And again, if anyone in the audience has a tip or a lesson learned, please feel free to share it in the chat. If you have questions, Q&A.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think we are all a community. You folks learn something every day. I certainly know I do. So, please do share things that help you sleep a little bit better at night. But, for those of you that really want to start at the beginning, the basics, focus on cleaning up data on your production instance. So I said it once, I'll say it again. You want to start with your largest, most impactful tables. Um, Clean up your subprods by starting with production. So look at your instances, see what you can clean up, and then clone down so that you're not redoing all of this work as you look at your subproductions. So that's kind of basic. If we want to take things one level deeper, there are a couple different aspects that we can look at if we go to the next slide. So in general, right, when we're planning, when we're looking at retention policies, we want to set these policies in accordance with our business requirements or regulatory requirements. And you need to find that Goldilocks sweet spot, right? You need to make sure that you're meeting the needs of all of your audits, you have sufficient retention, but you don't want excess data, right? We've talked about how that creates risk. So it's all about creating policies that align with the business, don't open up your exposure, but still give you the data that you need to kind of meet the requirements of the day. If you don't need the data for analytics, if you don't need the data for regulatory purposes, get rid of it. And I think the other thing that we've touched on in this conversation is that if you wait until you are up against a deadline or a compliance issue, it is very, very difficult to make progress overnight. Even if you run a delete job to clear out a whole bunch of data one evening, even if you create, table cleaner rules, all of these things take time. Data management solutions, again, are about practices to manage your data growth over time. And so by nature, that really requires planning. So start early, start often, implement these policies because you know that they're the right thing to do. Even if you're not having trouble today, hopefully we're all growing, we're all expanding with the work that we do, reaching more customers. And so, if it's not as busy or as critical now, it's a perfect time to do it because it will only become more critical over time. I mentioned a couple times that you should start with your subprods and clean those up and then clone down. I do not mean that you should just start implementing these rules directly in production with no testing. So make sure that you're creating tests that allow you to evaluate these rules, build up some mock data, run it in an environment where it's not going to do a lot of damage. And then at that point, you can implement in production. So definitely test your rules in subprod, but when it comes to cleaning up, you can use kind of that clone process to create parity in those cleanup changes as you move that data to your other environment. And so the last thing that you see here is the record life cycle. What records should be managed together? What records require rules? Again, focus on what's going to have the biggest impact on your system. Don't worry yourself trying to get a gigabyte here or there when really your problem is a terabyte. So those are kind of a little bit more granular. But again, planning is really the mother of success. The last thing I'll kind of touch on when it comes to sort of tips and best practices, again, the largest tables are going to give you the biggest return. So I would say also that it's not always intuitive, right, as how we should be creating rules. So one example of that is like your attachments table. When we log in and see, what's the biggest table in our instance, the attachment is far and away most commonly the largest. And so the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, let me go create a rule against that table. But really, what you want to do is understand what's driving those attachments. Like, are they coming from your email? Are they coming from incidents? And that's where you should be creating the rule and archiving those associated records or cleaning up those associated records, right? So the data management console can be very helpful in understanding what's driving that volume. And so when you see a big table, don't just say, "Oh man, I need to delete it. I need to clean it up." Understand what's driving it, and that gets back to kind of the mission of data management to understand your data and have the tools that you need to clean it up accessible at your fingertips, I guess I'll say. So emails can be large, audits can be a huge driver of volume. It's always a good idea to audit your audits, right? Make sure that you're actually auditing things that matter and you don't have superfluous audits because that can really drive up volume as well. So a couple different tips, a couple different best practices. Again, we could probably, fill books with all of the different elements of data management. So, we try to do our best to distill it down into a digestible webinar. But hopefully those tips and best practices are useful, and you learned a thing or two that you can kind of take with you from the webinar today.
That was great. Thanks, John. And thanks again, Samia, for the great demo. We've reached the end of our prepared content, but I wanted to kind of take a look at the Q&A to see what we have. We've tried to answer, we've gotten a lot of questions, you guys, so we've answered as many as we can. I wanted to take a look. Kevin had asked about with Zurich, we have better visibility, which I agree, we absolutely do. Thanks for all the implementations and changes that we've released. Are there any plans for ServiceNow to start metering, charging for storage capacity used? Yes, we actually do that today. So in your contract, you will be able to see that your instance, typically with each particular instance, comes with a base entitlement. If you navigate to subscription management and you go into, I believe it's account level entitlements, and then you'll be able to see your cloud capacity, assuming that you are on Yokohama or later with all your instances. You'll be able to see what your entitlements are, what you're using, and if you're over or under. So as an admin or anybody that's responsible for compliance of their contracts or their subscriptions, this is visible. So that is something that you guys do have limits on today. And let me see what else. Is there anything else, John or Samia, any questions that you guys want to, I guess maybe John, there's a question about clone, and does clone exclusion trigger cascade delete? If not, what's the best way to keep data integrity?
I was just answering another question about clones. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay. Or the one that you were answering. Go for it.
the two clone questions. Um, so so it does maintain the data integrity. Basically, when you clone particular data, and I'll try to, I guess, maybe answer both of these at once. When you clone data, what it does is it essentially copies all the data from your instance. But if you exclude that data, the tables that include it are actually empty. And so there was one kind of question about, how that helps with cleanup. Yes, it is part of the copy, but but ultimately it will be an empty table, and so you won't have that data populating your sub-production instance. You won't have to go up and clean it up afterwards. In terms of the additional piece for clone and data integrity, again, we're going to operate on all of those data sets as they're related to one another. We do not want to create additional orphans. And so there is that component of related records that we're maintaining in those relationships within ServiceNow.
Awesome. And then did you answer the other question on clone? I know there was a question about how does excluding the data help with the clone process? The excluded
Yeah,
data.
so it
It's
does
on.
it does not excluding doesn't necessarily speed up the clone process, as those that are familiar with it know. It just saves you from having to delete that data after the fact. So everybody's cloning data, but there are a lot of people that are cloning it and then they're going in, they're deleting a lot of information, and so they're essentially doubling the time that they need. They're taking that time to wait for the clone, and then they're taking the time to clean up that data when really an empty table sitting within the clone instance is going to be helpful for them.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And I see a lot of folks are answering more questions. Is there anything else, either Salmia or Tracy, any other questions that we want to answer live?
I do see a question about a demo on data management console and how to deep dive into a particular table and decide whether it's a potential candidate for archiving. Um, so that's part of the demo that we have today. Probably the recording will help. If not, please reach out and I can help you understand how um, you can visualize table details on data management console.
Awesome. Thanks for addressing that one. All right. I think we'll maybe answer a couple more as we're getting wrapped up, but Sharon, I'll go ahead and pass it back to you to talk through maybe some of our future sessions that we have for Platform Academies. And thanks everybody for having us.
It is a delight to have you join us. As I was telling you, this is a topic that is always important for us as developers and admins, is how do we manage our data? But speaking of future sessions, I do want to mention we have our platform encryption session coming up on Tuesday of next week. And then on that Thursday, I will be going over a new store app that we've released for Now Assist readiness evaluation. Essentially, when implementing Now Assist, how do you know how close to ready you are? And of course, we have our other academies I want to make sure we speak to. You've already found the Platform Academy for the fundamentals of the platform, but we also have for Platform Analytics, AI Academy, and Process Mining Academy. If you are looking to find the sign up for that, you can use either the QR code or the website to get to that. And we have our amazing feedback sessions. For everyone who's attended and joined and participated in one of these, thank you so much. That feedback is invaluable. But what this is it's an opportunity for us to hear in your voice what you feel is best about the platform and how we can do better. So please take advantage of filling this out as well. And the last thing I have for you today is, of course, if you are looking for even more information about the platform, feel free to make sure you utilize ServiceNow Impact, the ServiceNow University, as well as our expert services community. And with that, thank you all for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you. And to our amazing panelists, thank you so much for the expertise that you bring to this and making our session amazing today. Have a beautiful day.